it will be put on our YouTube channel within a day or two, either tomorrow or the next day. Probably tomorrow because it's going to rain tomorrow, so I can't do anything outside. And so that way you can go back and listen to a story if you want to hear it again, or when you can't make meetings, you can see that. Now, the link to the Inland Valley Storytelling YouTube channel, I put in the chat section. And in fact, I put 3 links, the Inland Valley Storytelling YouTube channel, and then tomorrow night, Antonio Rocha and Michael McCarty and 2 other storytellers, I can't remember their names, are doing a program. It will probably cost, I don't know how much. I'm planning on registering. Haven't yet, but I copied the registration link from the email he sent me. So if you're interested, you could do that. And then the 3rd link has nothing to do with storytelling, but just in case you're interested in learning about birds in the Inland Empire, Brian Elliott is quite an expert on birding, and he's doing a PowerPoint presentation March 17th, that's St. Patrick's Day, I believe, at 7 p.m. And I put in the registration link there. So why don't we briefly, we don't have a big group, so we could briefly have people introduce themselves. Those that do have audio. Jane, why don't you start? Introduce yourself.
I'm no prompt, right? I'm
No
Jane
prompt.
Codine,
Whatever you
and I'm in Upland. I mean, I'm in Ontario, California.
Okay. Ron, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ron Chick, and I tell stories all over the place in several different guilds and organizations. Hey, I did register for the entire winter concert series with the National Storytelling Association, which, yeah, I don't know about anybody else, but what I find myself doing is buying tickets to events, and only getting into some of them, only staying for a little while. But I support my art that way. So yeah, I'd like to tell a story tonight, and we'll get back to you later.
Okay. Barbara, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Barbara Rusley. I live in Claremont.
Okay, and Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Angyal in Riverside.
And Cass?
I'm Cass Armstrong, and I have a story, and I'm in Claremont.
And Walter, where'd you go? Did
Walter disappear?
Oh, there you are. I couldn't find you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Walter Roth. I live in Riverside. I'm here at the invitation of John. We hike together with a Sierra Club.
And tell stories together.
And occasionally tell stories together.
Yeah. Okay, now did I miss anybody?
Nick?
Nick?
Oh, yes, duh, Nick.
My name is Nick Smith, and I've been telling stories for a long time, and I currently live in North Hollywood, so I'm farther away from the center of the Inland Valley Storytellers than I used to be.
You're in a nice center, though. North Hollywood.
Well, fortunately, with Zoom meetings, being far away doesn't really make any difference.
Right. Yeah, and for a couple of storytellers, it's made a huge positive difference. Dusty, who used to come to some of the guilds in person, can't really do that anymore, but she's been showing up virtually to some of them, and she's been having a blast that way.
Yeah, she's attended a number of our story swaps, although I don't see her there tonight. I want to piggyback on what Ron Chick said. I also signed up for the winter series, and this Thursday, the storyteller is Andy Offutt Irwin. And if you've never heard Andy Offutt Irwin, you're in for a real treat. It's $15 for the one session. He is an incredible storyteller. He's an incredible whistler and musician.
Where's he from?
Georgia, Covington,
Ooh.
Georgia.
And the other good thing about that series is it'll stay up for 4 days. So if you can't make it that day, you have 3 more days to get
Right.
it.
Yeah, a lot of them are doing that. Yeah, you get a window. Mhm.
It's a help.
It
That's
is.
That's good to know about because they've been doing things at awkward times for me.
Yeah, it's a big help to have the several
Mhm.
day window.
And
Okay.
Andy's hilarious.
So who would like to tell a story first?
Well,
Just
sure,
be-
I can.
Okay, Nick will be first. Ron, you can be second. And everybody else mute yourself. I'm going to mute myself now.
Now, this is a story from Ireland, but I've honestly never heard any storytellers tell this one. It's not as common a tale. It's not one of the typical leprechaun or trick type stories that you hear told around this time of year. And with St. Patrick's Day coming next week, I thought I'd include something from Ireland. You see, this is one of the stories of Finn McCool and the men who followed him, the Fiannan, the heroes of Ireland. Now, you have to understand that in Irish tradition, these were the equivalent of the superheroes of their culture. These were men who were so strong that they could pick up a spear and throw it from one side of Ireland to the other, and so fast that they could run under the spear and catch it when it came back down. And if it happened to be a moist day, as happened a lot in Ireland, they could run between the raindrops all the way there and not be wet by the time they caught the spear coming down. And that was just part of the entrance exam. There was more to it than that, but that's another story. The point is that Finn and his band of heroes would travel around Ireland, but they were also friends. And so when there wasn't any war or any great adventure, they would just be together and do things together. And on the day of this story, they were out hunting together because it was something that they liked to do. And they went up into the hills and were hunting, and they were having terrible luck that day. Nothing worthy of a hunt really came in view except for the fog. For the Irish weather is just a tiny bit on the moist side, and that day it was becoming on the cool side as well, and the clouds were lowering down to where there was no distance between the sky and the ground, and in fact, there was a dense fog, and so they stopped wandering because they didn't want to bump into things and waited for the fog to clear a bit. But by then, they were all getting hungry and thirsty because they'd eaten and drunk all the things they brought with them up there, and they hadn't caught anything in their hunt. But as the fog lifted, off to the side of the path they'd found themselves on, they saw a little house and thought, well, maybe we can stop there and get some refreshment. Now, you have to understand that this was not a small group of men, for as it happened, there were 14 of them that day. Maybe the noise of 14 men walking through the hills is what scared off the game, but again, that's another story. They went up to the little house and called in, "May we come in? We have need of food and drink if you have it to spare." And a voice, thin and weak, came out, "Yes, come in." And they went in, and there was an old, not terribly impressive looking man sitting by the hearth of the fire. In fact, sitting almost in the hearth, sort of curled up the way one does when one doesn't feel like moving away from the source of heat that the fire provided. And he said, come in, come in. Oh, there's quite a crowd of you, but I think you can fit around the table." And they looked, and filling the room, there was quite a large table and seating for many of them, and they were able to squeeze in. And he called out, "Bring food, bring drink, there's visitors here." And from another room, a woman, much younger, came in, and she looked at them and went back and brought in food and drink. Now, there was one other being in the room. As it happened, there was a small sheep tied up against the wall. And Finn and his men didn't really feel like commenting on that because, you know, some people, if they don't have the money to build a barn or a stable, will keep an animal in the house with them. And this was just a small sheep out of the way, tied up. Well, Finn and Dermot and the others sat down and they began to eat and drink. But no sooner had they started to eat and drink than that little sheep stretched the rope it was tied to and snapped the rope and ran over and stuck its muzzle under the end of the table and flipped the whole table over. Food and drink went flying everywhere. Well, Finn and his men were not happy because they barely started to eat and they were hungry and thirsty. And besides, what did the sheep even do? I mean, that's a terrible thing. And the old man, who was still sitting down by the hearth, said, maybe one of you should go tie it back up. Well, Finn went over and he began to pull the little sheep back over to the wall so he could tie it up, and he couldn't move it. And Dermot, one of the strongest men in all of Ireland, came over and pulled, and he couldn't move the sheep either. Well, a couple of the others came over and gave it a try, and that sheep wouldn't budge. It was standing there in the middle of the room, just sort of glaring at them. And so the old man got up from where he'd been sitting by the fire, brushed some of the ashes off of his pants, went over to the sheep, picked it up by the scruff of the neck and dragged it back over to the wall and tied it back up. I guess I have to do these things myself. You youngsters just aren't up to such a task. And went back and flopped himself back into the ashes as Finn and his men fixed the table back upright, and the old man called out, we need more food and drink. The sheep's done things again. And the young woman came back out and provided them with food and drink. And they spent a fine evening of eating and drinking and trading stories with the old man. But Finn and the others were still puzzled by what had gone on. And besides, the young woman seemed attractive but familiar in some way, like Finn had met her before, and he wasn't sure where. So as things calmed down, he walked over to the door to the room where she was sitting and tried to strike up a conversation with her in hopes of realizing who she might be. And as he started to do that, she said, oh no, you've had me once, you'll not have me again, I'm beyond your reach. Well, this puzzled Finn even more, but he went back to the table and sat down. And Dermot and Donald and a couple of the others attempted the same thing over the course of the evening, trying to be polite, and got a similar response. Well, finally, Finn asked the question he'd been wanting to ask all evening. What was the story with the sheep? And the old man just laughed and laughed and laughed and called out, they want to know about the sheep. You'd best tell them. And the young woman came out and she said, so you want to know about the sheep? Well, that sheep is no ordinary sheep. That sheep is strength itself. Your host by the fire, he's no ordinary old man, I'd say, for he's death. And death can overcome any strength. Well, but, Finn said, but who are you and why do you seem so familiar? I, said the young woman, I'm youth. You had me once, you'll never be young again. And so it was that after resting, Finn and Vifiana left the house, went back home, but no matter how hard they tried, on the next trip and the trip after that into the hills to go hunting, they never quite found it again. But they had their memories of an evening spent with strength and death and youth and a lot of things to think about.
All right, great, Nick. Thank you. I have never heard that one before.
See, like I said, most storytellers don't tell it.
Yeah. I've heard stories about him and his group of men, several stories, but not that one. Okay, Ron Chick, I think you wanted to be next.
Yep. I would normally be tossing out into my audience these golden dollars as I tell this tale, but since it's me alone on a screen, I'll just hold one up when I should have thrown it to somebody. As if I throw it to John right now, he'd try, but I don't think he could catch it. This is basically a variation of Leprechaun Gold that I've created and used quite a bit in recent years. I call it Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And health, wealth, and happiness are basically the goals of life. For who would not want health? Who would not want wealth? And if you have neither health nor wealth, happiness would be hard to come by. Now, Rory O'Reilly was his proper name, but he was known throughout the region as Roarin' Rory. For blessed with a powerful body, he was always ready for a bit of fisticuffs or wrestling. But his temper was so foul that everyone could barely stand to be around him. They would laugh about how loud and argumentative he was. They'd say things like, only used one shuttle of coal to heat the house last night. And another day we're playing another joke, say, well, how's that? It was a powerful cold night. Well, I had Rory over for dinner and his hot air kept the place warm all night long. In any case, the business he had from his father was slowly failing, for he was such an unpleasant man. And he was frequently shouting one way or another. One morning, a very gray, drizzly day, he got mad at his poor apprentice for some reason or another, and went stomping around and screaming and shouting, and went out the back door of his shop, out into the fields, up into the meads and hills, without even noticing he didn't have his hat or cat coat with him. Now, had anyone else in the whole village been screaming and shouting this way, people would have come to help, but they just shrugged. That's Rory for you. He marched out quite a ways into the forest and suddenly he began to realize that it's wet and cold, and he started to turn back, but he looked over into and there, a distance from him, there appeared to be a break in the clouds. Nowhere else did he see one. And he made his way to where there was a ray of sunshine. And there, next to a stump, sat a leprechaun. Now, Rory was a good Irishman. He knew what to do. He winked and pointed his finger and said, I've got you, leprechaun. The leprechaun said, no, you don't. And he leaped up into the air. Rory could barely grab his bottom of his foot as the little man took off straight into the air, higher and higher and higher, screaming, let go, let go, let go. But of course, Rory didn't let go. He flew off to the north. And as he flew off to the north, he said, oh, Rory, it's your blessed day. It's Gaelic himself. He's following after us. If you can wink and catch at him, he'll give you magic wishes. Rory was wise in the ways of leprechauns and didn't let go and didn't look away. So he flew back to the south. He flew back to the south for a ways, getting higher and higher. I said, Rory, I banshee of death is right next to you. If he touches us, we'll both be running out to the Neverland forever. Look out. Rory, of course, was wise in the way of leprechauns, and didn't look away and didn't let go. The little man flew back, and suddenly he had another idea. He said, Rory, what would your sainted mother be thinking of a great big brute of a man like you hanging on to the foot of a tiny little man like me? Why don't you ask her? She's right next to you. For a fraction of a second, Rory was tempted to look, but he was wise in the ways of leprechauns and did not let go or look away. And the little man landed back down in the sunlit glade. And there on the top of the stump, was a beautiful gold coin. And next to it, a pot of gold. And the little man looked at Rory and said, choose. And Rory looked at the pot of gold and looked at the single gold coin and reached forward and picked up the single gold coin. And the rain began to pour down on him, and it was cold and dark, but in his hand was still the coin. He looked at it and read, health, wealth, and happiness be yours. Why, that's exactly what a man's always wanted. But on the back it said, but only if you share this blessing with others. Well, I'm not quite sure what that means, but he kept it in his hand and played with it as he walked back to the village. As he stepped out on the road, coming toward him was the widow Donnerly. She'd been taking care of her grandchildren whose parents had gone on as well. And they were running down the street, and as she walked toward him, he looked at her and was suddenly saying, well, health, wealth, and happiness be yours, Mrs. Donnelly, and tossed to her the coin. She caught it and looked at it and smiled and thanked him, and Rory headed toward his shop. As he approached the shop door, he could see coming toward his shop that day his best, worst customer. He and O'Malley had argued over every tenth of a farthing for years. They grumbled and hated each other and told everyone what awful people they were, but they still did business together. As the grumpy man came up to him, he reached into his pocket where he felt a weight, and there was the same coin. He looked at it and then looked at his enemy and said, health, wealth, and happiness be yours, sir, and dropped the coin in his hand. The man was astounded. And Rory thought, well, a single gold coin's about what I make in a month. It's not a fortune, but it's a good deal of money. But this is fine. And he stepped into his shop where his apprentice looked at him in fear, and he felt the weight of the coin in his pocket again. And he took it out and flipped it to him and said, health, wealth, and happiness be yours. Take the rest of the day off. Well, from that point forward, that was his cry. It was found that no one could keep the coin more than one time. The coin would be there, they could spend it once, and then it would be gone. But it was always back in Rory's pocket. And so he went through the village, went through the town, went through the area, calling to anyone she saw the first time of the day, health, wealth, and happiness be yours. Laura, the prettiest girl in the 3 counties, thought, I could like this merry man. And so after a brief, happy courtship, they were married. His business that had been failing utterly was now growing by leaps and bounds, for who would not want to be around such a friendly, helpful, generous man? The children came and grew, and their wealth and power and fame grew as well. The years went on, and they decided to do something that was just then coming into vogue. They were going to retire. They would turn the business over to their eldest, build for themselves a nice little country manor house, and live there peacefully. On that last blessed day, They turned the keys over to their eldest, and they went through the town, and everyone was lining the streets, and they kept flipping the coin and flipping the coin and flipping the coin, calling out, health, wealth, and happiness to all. And everyone flipped the coin back and said, health, wealth, and happiness to you, Rory. And they walked out of the village and down the road toward their new home. But as they came around the bend, there coming toward them was a stranger. Rory looked at him and reached in to grab the coin from his pocket. But for the first time in many years, there was no coin there. Ah, Happy O'Reilly, is it? Hey, glad to see you, my friend. May health, wealth, and happiness be yours. And the man slapped what seemed to be the same gold coin in his hand. Rory looked at it and said, health, wealth, and happiness be. But the man was gone. He and Laura went on to their house and opened the door. And there, on the table, on the counters, on the floor, were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gold coins, one for each time he had shared the blessing with another. And you know, that be the way of gold, whether it be leprechaun magic or the gold you earn by the sweat of your own brow. It is wealth. It may buy you some health. But if you want happiness, you must be willing to share. And may health, wealth, and happiness be yours.
That's great. Hey, Ron. Thank you very much. I remember you telling that at the basement there in Riverside and tossing the coins out. Oops, you muted yourself.
Yep. And when I tell it to children, I tell them that they'll catch a coin, but they have to return it, but that they get a chocolate-filled coin in exchange. Okay, so they all get a little bit of guilt when they catch one of the coins.
Cool.
Of course, I haven't told the story in person to anybody in a year and a half, maybe.
Right.
Certainly a year.
It's exactly
Okay, guys.
a year, actually,
Yeah.
that we went to Texas to the Tejas Storytelling Festival last March. And I believe we traveled on the 10th. And we got there, and that's when the testing started happening and everything. By the time we got home, in fact, they called off the festival after 2 days. It was a 4-day festival. And we left and came home early, and then everything was shut down. So I haven't had a haircut in a whole year. Okay, who would like to tell the next story? All right, Cass, unmute yourself. I'm going to mute me.
Okay, just one quick little Irish vignette that I've seen on a sampler. Lord, bless the hearts of our friends and turn the hearts of our enemies. And if you can't turn their hearts, turn their ankles, so we'll know them by their limping. I always like that as the Irish thing. What I'd like to do tonight, I just thought of this and was able to transcribe it. When I was in high school, we were assigned to write a story, a poem that was a story to music. And I went through my folks' record collection, and I guess this would be in the early 60s. And I found this album called Taboo Alunde, which was kind of jungle jazz, Afro beat jazz. And I wrote this piece to it. The jungle beat, throbbing in one's ears, quells all courage, gives birth to fears. Dark and darker in this teeming hell, there from the underbrush comes a death knell. Dying, living, growing pain. When will the jungle strike again? Macumba is dead. Long live his soul, rot though he may in this dank hall. Let his spirit live, let our people pray for that the mighty jungle for his life will pay. Drink now, drink, drink, drink his blood and take of it the spirit that in him did awake. cry now, scream as the liquid burns your throat. But drink, drink, drink it, let it your soul coat. Enters the lion, prowling from its lair. Spies he great Macumba lying naked there. Fear him, kill him, stab him with your knife. There, mighty jungle, a life for a life. Revenge, revenge, can you ask more? Would you rather the hate inside you store? Black to gray now, breaks the jungle night. In the light of day now, birds begin their flight. Monkeys chatter endlessly, safe in the trees. The children awaken, begin to play and tease. But where is Macumba? Lying all alone, eyes rolled back, seeing naught but the unknown. Fear it, hate it, love it, and then you can be one of the jungle men. That's it. Did you like that, Barbara? Me too. Thank you. It's so weird. I think when you write something that early, I just was able to recall the whole thing. I
Wow.
hadn't saved it or anything, but that was just weird. I thought I'd share it.
So
That's
you-
true. Revenge, revenge. Would you rather the hate store?
Yeah. I know. Well, this is this is a junior in high school writing with limited social
It's
background.
with raging hormones. That's what it is.
What? It's what?
It's with raging hormones, all that passion. Let that blood fall over your soul.
Right. No, drink it. Yes. Burn your throat. You're taking his spirit so we can avenge him. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And real awkward, convoluted rhymes to make things work. Yeah. It's all part of it. I just thought it was fun. And I was amazed that I was able to transcribe it.
Yeah.
So good to see everybody. Elizabeth. We were just about to go see each other when all of a sudden this virus thing.
Yeah,
Have you had
Yeah.
vaccinations now?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you had both your vaccinations now?
Yes, I did. Actually, I had the second one last week. I'm good. I'm good.
But they're saying people that have had their vaccinations like 2 weeks after could get together in small groups without masks. I know
Yeah.
Jane got hers.
People that
Yeah.
have vaccinations, yeah.
Well, we
Yeah.
can get together in small groups. I am
Yeah.
all for it. I'm
We're
all
gonna
for
try-
it.
We're going to try that tonight with Lou and Lillian. We're going to go watch an Italian movie with them in their living room.
Oh, that's nice.
And-
That's
but
very nice.
we're gonna keep our masks on because it hasn't been 12 days since their second shot.
Yeah.
And I think you're supposed to wait 2 weeks from their second shot. So we're still gonna socially distance and wear masks.
Mhm. Well, have a nice evening then.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
baby steps.
Yeah. Mhm.
So who would like to be the next storyteller? Walter, you want to give it a go? Okay, unmute yourself and I'll mute myself.
Well, I'll give it a shot. But understand that I'm not an experienced storyteller like you all. But I guess I would describe this as a 20th century fairy tale, a suburban fairy tale. It was actually written by James Thurber in 1939 for the New Yorker. And this is my retelling of it. A man sitting in his breakfast nook looked up from his scrambled eggs and saw a white unicorn with a golden horn cropping roses in his garden. This was unusual, so he rose, went upstairs, and into the bedroom where his wife was still asleep. He abruptly woke her up and said, "There's a unicorn in the garden, and it's eating our roses." She slowly turned and looked at him with one unfriendly eye. She said, "Don't be ridiculous. The unicorn is a mythical beast." And then she rolled over to go back to sleep. The husband went downstairs and out into the garden, where he found the unicorn browsing among the tulips. He plucked up a lily and held it out. Here, unicorn, he cried sweetly. Come on, come here. The unicorn timidly approached and nibbled on the lily. Excitedly, the husband went back in the house, up the stairs into the bedroom, and woke his wife up for the second time. And then he said, the unicorn ate a lily right out of my hand. This time the wife sat up and regarded him with a cold stare. You are a loony, she said, and I'm going to have to put you in the loony bin. Now, the husband did not like the word loony, and he disliked even more the term loony bin. So he said, oh yeah? Well, we'll just see about that. He walked to the door, stopped, turned, and said, and it has a golden horn coming right out of the middle of its forehead. Then he went downstairs and out into the garden to see what the unicorn was doing. But the unicorn had gone. So he sat among the roses, and soon he fell asleep in the morning sun. The wife, however, as soon as she saw that her husband had left the house, got out of bed, dressed quickly, went downstairs, and started dialing the phone. She called up the police, and she called up a psychiatrist. She told them, this is an emergency. Come quickly and bring a straitjacket. She hung up the phone with a sly smile on her lips and a gleam in her eye. She sat down and waited, but she didn't wait long. Soon, 2 policemen and a psychiatrist arrived. She let them in, and they sat in chairs, and they watched her with great interest. She told them, my husband told me there was a unicorn in our garden this morning. He told me it was eating our roses. Silence. The psychiatrist looked at the police. The police looked at the psychiatrist. She was a little unnerved by their reaction, so she began again. It ate a lily right out of his hand, she said. Silence again. The psychiatrist looked at the police looked at the psychiatrist. So she began a little more forcefully this time and a little annoyed. She said, well, it has a golden horn coming right out of the middle of its forehead, for heaven's sake. At that, the psychiatrist nodded to the police, whereupon they leaped out of their chairs and seized her. They tried their best to subdue her, which was not easy because she put up a terrific fight. But eventually, they did subdue her. They were just getting her into a straitjacket when the husband entered the room. One of the police said, hey, buddy, did you tell your wife that you saw a unicorn in the garden? The husband said, don't be ridiculous. The unicorn is a mythical beast. That's all I wanted to know, said the psychiatrist. And they took her away. The psychiatrist said to the husband, I'm very sorry, sir, but your wife is as crazy as a jaybird. But don't worry, we will take good care of her. And they did. They took her away, and eventually they put her in an institution, which some people derisively call a loony bin. And the husband, he lived happily ever after.
James Thurber, huh? That's great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, who would like to be next? Do we have any other stories? Adrian, do you have one tonight? No.
Okay. I have something that, hang on a second. I want to, I might have to read part of it because I can't remember, have not memorized all the names yet.
Okay.
But this being, a month of the Celtic holiday next week, St. Patrick's Day, and St. Bridget has always been a very interesting character, and all the various ways in which she, protects, is a saint of love, of fire, of the home. Anyway, so I found this really interesting sort of ritual. It said that by repeating the genealogy of Bridget, you'll always be protected. So I was going to read it to you so that you are all protected. And then there's some interesting note about it at the end. So as a gift of protection to you from St. Bridget, this is the genealogy of the Holy Maiden Brady. That's another name for her. Radiant flame of gold, noble foster mother of Christ, Brady, daughter of Dougal the Brown, son of Oda, son of Art, son of Con, son of Creer, son of Sis, son of Carmack, and son of Caroon. Every day and every night that I say the genealogy of Brady, I shall not be killed. I shall not be harried. I shall not be put in a cell. I shall not be wounded. Neither shall Christ leave me in forgetfulness. No fire, no sun, no moon shall burn me. No lake, no water, nor sea shall drown me. No arrow of fairy, nor dart of fay shall wound me. And I, under the protection of my Holy Mary, and my gentle foster mother is my beloved Brady. So the note about this is it's one of the most ancient rituals that is reflected in this piece, sort of the threefold death of burning, drowning, and stabbing. This was usually the form of death of the sacred king, after which time he became one with the land. So I thought this was an interesting blending of Celtic folklore and, Catholic saint lore kind of put together as a way of offering you a protective blessing. So blessings to you.
Thank you.
So were those names Celtic?
They are, and I probably said them really badly because I have not actually studied Gaelic.
Okay, because I
Yeah.
didn't recognize any of them.
They're probably pronounced a lot differently in the Gaelic tongue. It's actually one of the languages I would really like to study because that's my heritage. But for now, those names are anglicized as they come out of my mouth. Something that would rile any Irish man or woman, I'm sure. So
I think they're happy people are just speaking Gaelic.
yeah. I just
That'll
want them
fit
to,
in.
I don't want them to revoke my my card carrying Gaelic background.
Okay, well, thank you, Adrian.
I'm gonna have to go.
Okay, bye, Cass. Thanks for sharing that amazing poem.
Yeah, and thanks for the stories I got to hear. I'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye. So, Barbara, do you have one tonight? No, I
Nope.
didn't prepare one either.
What? What?
Although I could tell a story, I suppose.
Do.
All right, I can do that. I was hoping to have, an Irish story or a Celtic story, but I've been so busy digging in my front yard and planting plants, and I wanted to get it done before our rain tomorrow, that I didn't have time to work up a new one. But what I could do is practice one I haven't told for a while, because it's good to keep them in practice. Let's see, which one shall I do?
And what did you plant?
Oh, an avocado tree, a lavender plant, and a lemon verbena plant. The lemon verbena, if you've never heard of it, is really, really great for making herb tea. How many have ever heard of lemon verbena? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
Or-
'cause that's one of the teas your wife makes that is my favorite. The lemon verbena, lemongrass, and lemon
Yes, 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 yes.
balm. Yes.
That's right.
that's
She
my favorite.
bring it to the meeting sometimes. Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the old TV show Little House on the Prairie, you know that that was Laura's favorite fragrance because her teacher wore it too.
Oh,
And her mother wore it too.
I didn't know that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a story, a Danish folktale. It's called The Fat Cat. Once upon a time, there was an old woman who was cooking some gruel in a great big pot, and she was stirring that gruel as it was cooking. But she was getting tired of stirring it, and she wanted to go visit a neighbor friend, and so she asked her cat if he would take care of stirring it while she went to visit. And so she left, and the cat started stirring the gruel, but it smelled good and tasted good. And the cat ate the whole gruel, the whole pot of gruel, and the pot too. Well, that made the cat kind of fat. And he decided to go for a walk to walk it off. So he went out the house and started walking along. And he met a man named Skohottentot. And Skohottentot said, "What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat." And the cat said, "Oops, back up a step. It's been a while since I've told the story. Before the cat went out for the walk, the old woman came home and said, 'What has happened to the gruel?' And then she looked at the cat and said, 'What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot too, and now I'm also going to eat you.' And he swallowed the old woman. Now he went out for the walk, and he met Skohottentot, who said, 'What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and now I am also going to eat you.' And the cat swallowed Skohottentot, which made him even fatter. And he continued to walk down the road, and he met Skolinkenlot. And Skolinkenlot said, 'What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Skohottentot, and now I'm also going to eat you.' And he swallowed Skolinkenlot and continued to walk down the road, even fatter than before. And the cat came to, okay, let's see what's next. 5 girls dancing. And the 5 girls dancing said, 'What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Skohottentot and Skolinkenlot, and now I am also going to eat you.' And the cat swallowed the 5 girls dancing and continued walking down, even fatter than before. Next, he met 7 birds in the flock. And the 7 birds in the flock said, 'What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Skohottentot and Skolinkenlot and 5 girls dancing. And now I am also going to eat you.' And he swallowed the 7 birds in the flock. Well, next, he came to a lady with a pink parasol. And the lady with the pink parasol said, 'My, what have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat.' And the cat said, 'I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Skohottentot and Skolinkenlot, and 5 birds in the flock, and 5 girls dancing, and 7 birds in the flock, and now I'm also going to eat you. And the cat swallowed the lady with the pink parasol. Next, the cat came to a parson with a crooked staff. And the parson said, "Dear me, what have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat." And the cat said, "I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Hottentot, and Lincolnlot, and 5 girls dancing, and 7 birds in the flock, and the lady with the pink parasol, and now I'm also going to eat you." And he swallowed the parson with the crooked staff. He was so fat, he was practically rolling down the street now. He could barely move. And next he came to a woodcutter with an axe. And the woodcutter looked at the cat and said, "What have you been eating, my little cat? You are so fat." And the cat said, "I ate the gruel and the pot and the old woman too, and Hottentot, and Lincolnlot, and 5 girls dancing, and 7 birds in the flock, and the lady with a pink parasol, and the parson with her crooked staff. And now I am also going to eat you." "No, you are wrong," said the woodcutter. And he took his axe and he chopped open that cat's fat stomach. And out came the parson with the crooked staff, the lady with the pink parasol, the 7 birds in the flock, the 5 girls dancing, Lincolnlot, Hottentot, and the old woman, who reached in and took her pot out as well. And then the woodcutter patched up that cat's stomach, and it wasn't fat anymore. Fat cat, Danish folktale. Now I have a story that goes with that. And the story has to do with visiting my brother's house in Pennsylvania, and his granddaughters were spending the night. And of course, my brother said, "Oh, your Uncle John," actually great Uncle John, is a storyteller. How about if he tells you a bedtime story? Well, the problem is I didn't have bedtime stories. I decided, well, I'll tell the fat cat. Well, I got into the story, and when it got to the woodcutter, the oldest of the 2 granddaughters said, "Stop! Don't tell anymore. I don't want to hear anything more." And so I had to stop telling the story. And I'm not sure whether she just got tired of this cat swallowing people, or she could guess that the woodcutter was going to kill the cat, or what, but she had had enough of this story. And that's when I realized that the stories we tell at our storytelling events are not necessarily bedtime stories.
This is like a very dark version of the old lady who swallowed the fly. I don't know why,
At least there's a kind of a whimsical rhythm to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. You gotta be singing that all night. Ha ha, sorry. Oh, funny. Well, I found another story that that I was looking for earlier today, and it's it goes to show a very old saying, and you'll figure out what it is by the end of the story, that we all are familiar with. I won't say what it is, but at the end of it, you'll figure it out. So it's a story of the enchanted waters of, okay, again, my Gaelic is not cultivated yet, but I think it's Sligan or Sligacan, but Sligan, I'll say. There's a little bridge in Sligacan in the Isle of Skye. A small stream runs below it, and you can look up to a mighty mountain. Many travelers would never think to stop there to have a look around. It's just another beautiful stream in the Scottish Highlands. But that's because they don't know that the water has magical powers to grant you eternal beauty. No, really, it does. We've splashed around there thousands of times and we're stunningly beautiful. Or at least that's what our mums tell us. Anyway, the way this stream became magical is one of our favorite myths of Skye. So it's the tale of these enchanted waters, and it begins with the story, the Scotland's warrior woman. I think it's Scatha. And again, if you know Gaelic and you want to correct me, I'm up for it. But I'll say it's Scatha. She lived in Skye, and the news was traveling around the world that she was the greatest fighter in all of Scotland. But this news traveled to the wrong people. Cuchulainn, and Ireland's favorite warrior, had found out. He wasn't a bad guy, he was just very competitive, and he had to know if he could defeat her in battle. So he jumped across the ocean to Skye and challenged her. But Scatha was no coward, even though Cuchulainn had the strength of Hercules and was half god. She accepted the challenge. She even believed she could win. So this fight was bigger than Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee, bigger than the Terminator versus Predator. It would be the largest fight this land's ever known. The battle raged for weeks. Valleys were moved, mountains shaken, and all the animals had fled the Isle of Skye. But Scatha's daughter couldn't take it anymore. She was upset beyond belief and ran down to the stream to cry. And she shouted, "Please, somebody stop this fighting. I can't take it anymore." And she was in luck. The fairies of the river heard her. They beckoned her to dunk her face in the stream to discover how she could stop this terrifying battle. She did as they asked, and the fairies blessed her with the knowledge of what to do. Her legs pattered across the land as she ran around Skye, finding herbs, meats, nuts, and every delicious thing that this small island could produce. She then brought them home and stewed up the most delicious broth you could imagine. The smells of this meal were incredible. The scents traveled far and were so delicious they could make you hungry again after a 10-course Michelin-starred feast. The fighting warriors smelled it, couldn't fight on. Their saliva was gushing like the Niagara Falls, so they agreed to take a break to enjoy the feast. Scatha and Cuchulainn arrived at the house and scoffed up the food like they hadn't eaten a meal in their entire lives. The feast marked the end of the battle, and by eating in the home of Scatha, Cuchulainn had become a guest. And Cuchulainn was no animal. He had been raised with good manners and knew the rules of Celtic hospitality. You can't fight someone who has hosted you, ever. So there the battle ended. And I would say one of the earliest stories of the fastest way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
Right. Thank you. Oh, okay. Anybody else have another story they want to tell, or that may do the evening? I pasted again in the chat the 3 links I mentioned at the beginning: the YouTube channel, the Inland Valley Storytelling YouTube channel, and the link to the Antonio Rocha and Michael McCurdy concert on the 10th, and the Sierra Club birding presentation.
I put in the link to the StoryNet thing for Earth Up, but like I said, you're gonna have to wait a day or two to actually register for it. But it'll be worth it if you can make time that weekend, and the programs will be up like the other things for a few days after. I believe that some of the stuff will be up until April 20th. But the stuff goes up April 9th.
April 20th being Earth Day, right?
Yeah. So that's why the things will be available until Earth Day. By the way, I think if I'm understanding which story, Adrian, that you were telling, I think the male character there is usually pronounced Cahulan.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
it's one of those names that has way more letters than syllables.
Right. No, I think you're right. Now that I hear you say it, it's like, okay, yes, I have heard that pronunciation. Thanks.
I hadn't heard that story. That was an interesting story. I like that.
That was kind of fun. Well, actually, and there is this bridge that you can go to with this stream, and supposedly if you dunk your face in it, you know, you're beautiful and become wise, and you know, you just don't mess around though. There's fairies there. So and they's as scary beasts in some stories.
Okay, so unless there's anybody else who wants to share something, thank you all for joining us tonight, and I will get the recording posted tomorrow, most likely up on the YouTube channel.
Great.
Great.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
It was great.
Have a
Thank-
happy St.
Good
Patrick's
night.
Day.
Good night, everyone.
Dobra.
Thank you for joining us, Walt.
Happy St. Patrick's.
See you next month.
Okay.
Hi, Virginia.